celebrity interviews live from the Grotto without Greg Hanna. And Greg's allowing me during his time to interview other guests, as also in syndicated on the Neil Haley Show. And my guest today is celebrity actor Thaao Penghlis. Thaao, thanks for stopping by. You're going to talk podcasting with me. I'm so excited. The cookbook got me so motivated when we talked probably last year. Thanks again for stopping by.
Oh, thank you for allowing me to come and express my next project on top of doing Days of Our Lives, which I was at the studio yesterday. After 44 years, it never gets old.
Really? We can talk about that after we talk about the podcast, but that's crazy how you can have that longevity. That's fantastic in acting, but also to have the same job for so long. So
yeah, and also they gave me two characters, so it became multidimensional. Serials, a lot of stories borrowed but expressed differently, because there are only, 7 stories to tell. And I just look back on it and I thought, who would have thought that I would have lasted this long? But it's hard keeping the interest as a character to the audience and never letting them know the whole story.
No, that's so true. And if you build a fan base and they keep coming back for more and you get great feedback, you found your gift. But also you have a lot of other projects, but we're going to talk about the new podcast, Great Escape. So talk about, Thaao, why did you decide to do it?
Well, I was in Egypt. This was the 9th time. I've been there 14 now. And I originally had read about climbing Sinai, which I thought was an extraordinary thing to do. And so I went to Egypt and trained myself for 3 months so I could exercise to be able to walk that high up. And I went there at 1 o'clock in the morning and arrived at 6. And it was such an incredible feeling to be on the top of that mountain and thinking of the history that came through from the time of Moses. And I remember a monk who lived up there in this small church, and he said to me, I want to thank you for coming. And I said, why are you thanking me? He says, because when you walk the path, you keep it alive. And so I always remembered how that affected me. And so this next journey, which was also to deal with religion in a sense, was how the Holy Family woke up one morning and escaped because they knew that Herod was going to massacre all children under 2 years old. And so they ran off and by boat up the Nile and disappeared for 4.5 years while the secret police were after them. And so I decided to take these 8 sacred spaces within 2 weeks and stay overnight and get the feeling of what they must have gone through, what was the history there. And there was, the first part was disappointing because when I looked at it, I thought, there's nothing here. Where is that history of Heliopolis, the city that had such an incredible entrance and great port in the ancient world? And just recently in National Geographic, they have just uncovered the area that I walked in that was so ordinary, and they're found all these statues and buildings. The Nile shifting all the time. The silt builds up and the statues collapse, and then they're covered through, because we're talking about 2,700 years. And so anyways, I took that journey for 2 weeks, and I must say I was moved because it brought Christianity into Egypt, and it's called the Coptic religion. And there was a one wonderful church up in a mountain called the Church of the Palm. And I thought it was because of palm trees.
Right.
When I went to visit, it was an entire rock that had been carved into a church. And outside, there was a sign. What happened was that the Christ child, there was a rock that had collapsed from the mountain coming down on them, and he put his hand up and blocks it. But what was left was a handprint. And that's why they call it the Church of the Palm. It was about Christ's child's palm. So, listen, you read the stories, but then you find your own interpretation. And then I thought, who were the 3 wise men? How did all that become part of the picture? So I explored the 3 wise men coming from northern Persia called Saba. And in that area, King Photosas was having nightmares. And they were the interpreters, the astrologers, and the psychics for the royal court. So they interpreted his dream because he thought his son was trying to usurp his crownship. But they saw in when they were manifesting out of their dreams, they saw, and also in astrology, that a certain thing was to take place in astronomy that would be probably the greatest thing that ever happened in 1,000 years. And that's when they decided that this incredible thing was going to happen in Judea. And so the whole route of that, which came, but by the time they reached, and also they couldn't travel in the summer months, it's too hot, because they had to go through the Negev Desert, the Sahara Desert, and then on down from Syria into Jerusalem. Took place was about when the Christ child we saw was always in a manger. The whole picture of it, when you look at it,
right,
the animals and all that, and it's a lovely postcard. But it's not actually truth, because the wise men did not reach that part until the Christ child was almost 2. And that's why the massacre of the innocents, why Herod proclaimed that those boy child under 2 years of age, why did he say under 2? Didn't say just babies, under 2. And so that's what became the massacre of the innocents, and how the wise men, because you have two kings. One was Herod, and then you have Artaxerxes. And they're both villains in a sense. And then you have the 3 wise men coming through as a spiritual exercise in order to bring forth knowledge to the world that something sacred was taking place. And so you have these 2 villains, and that's what I brought into the story. Part 1 is basically how I went to Egypt, how I discovered all these areas. And then I wrote part 1, part 2 of the story, and that's to deal with the massacre, the Christ child, and the escape into Egypt, which I thought was just fascinating. And then, and how did they, and how they proclaimed, how do you, in a Muslim world, how do you change a religion where you brought Christianity and people saw it?
Yeah. This is fascinating, the research and the decision for a podcast, because this could be a book too, you could write.
Yes. Yeah. I'm looking at it to possibly write it as a mini series.
Oh.
Because I think, let's face it, when it comes to our Christmas holidays, and everybody has their own, some people just have Christmas holidays, others have holidays for the Christians, and there are so many of us. And I always think that's the time when people are really looking for faith.
Yeah.
To test their faith and to acknowledge their faith and also to celebrate it. And we do it through many ways, through gifts and shows and programs and music. Music is so important. And so my publicist, she put the sound effects, which brought great reality to the show, because
wow,
what it does, you realize without sound effects, you're just telling a story. But with the sound effects, it actually makes you feel like you're there.
No, and that's the thing. We're back to old time radio again, Thaao. That's the cool thing, right? So never give up on a medium, right? Even if the days when say, newspapers are dead, the online newspapers survived. Maybe they'll go back to the physical newspapers again. They came back to the record player. So you never know. So just because it was a trend at one point and thought it was dead, it's back and people love it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's what it does is, when you're looking at a movie and the pictures are there for you. Your imagination doesn't have to. But when you're listening to radio, when you're listening to stories, that is just the ear. And then it's the mind that starts to create these pictures by the way we're telling the story. And I thought you did such an extraordinary job. And backwards and forwards, we went with the music. You can only use certain music without having problems with it. And she did a fantastic job, Jill. And I'm very pleased. I think it's the way to go, because I've got now other ideas about what other stories I want to tell along the way. And for me as an actor, I understood why people in radio love just going in, and they could be animated. It's also the way they do cartoons. They're animated and you have no restrictions.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Why do you think I love think I love one of my gigs, which I consider it a hobby, even though, because my businesses, I have an agency and a tutoring business. I love this, and I could do this 24/7, 7 days a week, and it doesn't feel like anything. And it's so much fun. You get to learn so much. You get to express so much. You keep your brain going in so many ways.
I think when I was writing, I had a writing partner. She says, "Where the hell do you get that imagination?" And I realized I've gone through so many cultures. I've walked in the footsteps of great stories, great walking in the footsteps of Jesus, walking in the footsteps of Moses, crossing
Yeah.
Sinai Desert and climbing Mount Sinai. All those things give you such, that's why I think I've lasted so long on days, because the character never became dull, even though sometimes the stories were a little bit exaggerated and a little bit strained. And how do you make it work? How do you lift that dialogue off the page and make the audience feel that they're seeing something unique? And to me, that's how do you broaden yourself as a human being so that when you tell the story, you and what you manifest is greater than the norm.
But I think you're a great guy too. You're down to the earth. You want to have people on the set that are very talented, but yet can work with so many in the soap opera because you're shooting so many days, and you got to have people. And it seems like people you could get along with people well.
Well, what is chemistry? I guess my producer said, "I love the work that you did today," and she said, "You create such chemistry." And what is it? It's having the ability to feel free enough to be able to reach the partner that you're working with, and being able for them to trust. And so you help open them up. And what is suddenly this person who may be nervous on the set because they're new or because their part of the story is not particularly interesting, how do you draw that out of people? It's a dance. You pass the ball, the other actor throws the ball back at you. So it's a give and take situation as you go along. And once you have the dialogue down and you're not stuck with just dialogue, because let's face it, doing 8 scenes in one day is not easy. And especially since they give you all these convoluted lines and they twist the mouth and you stumble over lines because of the phraseology. And it's always, to me, it's always a challenge, but you overcome that challenge. That's what makes it interesting.
Okay. There's a question that my co-host always asks all of his guests, and this is a really deep one, but I think you're good at deep answers. So tell me, what is the most important thing in life you've ever learned?
That I was good enough. And so I was able to early in life be able to give back, and feeling that my foundation was strong enough to be able to let go of things that instead of hoarding them. I found the gift of giving. And that's part of what we do as an exercise as actors. We give information, we give so many levels of life. And I think the journeys that I've taken, there have been many. When I come back, I think at this stage in my life, I need more years because I haven't finished. I think that's part of it is the curiosity, and that through that curiosity allows you to be able to enhance yourself. And what you present is an example that people like to follow, people like to listen to. So I think for me, it's about the gift of giving, because we're in a world where it's a lot of takers, it's a lot of greed, a lot of jealousy. And I don't know why I would like to go into that, but that'll be too political. But giving, I'm surprised when, even I had a house guest here for a week at Christmas. Do you think they would even call and say, thank you for what you did?
Oh my.
It's about how do you give? I think that's what comes back to yourself. I think the fulfillment of that is that I've been rewarded by having such riches in my life.
You're living life and loving life, man.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. Every day I can't wait to get up and work and live my life. There's not a day in my life that I don't want to get up. Maybe a little bit, but meaning it's just an amazing life, and that you're living an amazing life. Where can we check out the podcast?
Certainly on Spotify and Amazon, and it's in 3 parts. The first part is the longest, about 40 minutes, but what a journey it was to discover and also to find your own humility, where you come across people. Like I was in one village and a young kid, it must have been about 14, came running to me and said, please take me out of here. I don't want to die here. And I remember the struggles that people, so in many ways, I'm thinking, look, I'm in a foreign land. I'm traveling all these magnificent stories and walking in the footsteps of greatness, and having a chance to sit in front of an ancient column, being able to tell a story. We don't feel blessed enough in life. We just keep, that's why I mean about the takers. You've got to pause As a friend of mine said one time when we were in the cave where the Holy Family had hid, and I said, okay, let's go to the next spot. He says, can we just stay here for 10 minutes and just take it in without having to rush? Now, that taught me a lesson that you must pause at times and realize the blessings that have come into your life.
Okay. And check it out on Spotify. Your book's available on Amazon, your cookbook.
Yes.
Anything else? And check you out on Days of Our Lives every day, right?
Yes. Yeah. My God. You reach a certain age and you hear people don't want to do it anymore because they can't remember their lines. And I'm not having that problem, thank God.
Okay. Appreciate it. That was a special simulcast, The Neil Haley Show, and celebrity interviews live from the Grotto with Greg Hanna. Guys, take care.